He left her 6 months ago, a cold, ruthless Mafia boss. But tonight, a single call shatters everything. His ex-wife is in labor and in danger. Will Liam Blackwood make it in time, or will the one life he can't control slip through his fingers? Hi everyone, I'm Selena, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight I've got a story full of danger, passion, and unexpected twists, where love, power, and secrets collide in ways you won't believe. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive into the world of Liam Blackwood and Emma Carlisle. Liam Blackwood stepped off the private jet into the humid New York night, his tailored black coat brushing against the cool wind. The city had changed while he was away. New skyscrapers, new players, new threats. But the streets still whispered the same secrets. His piercing blue eyes scanned the terminal, calculating, cold. Every step he took echoed authority, a warning to anyone daring enough to cross him. Rumors of his ruthless campaign against the Harland crime family had already spread. Rival bosses had fallen, pawns had been crushed, and Liam had emerged unscathed. The city would remember his name. Even so, power alone never satiated him. There was a hollowness in victory, a void he hadn't expected. Liam's life was built on fear and respect, and yet, tonight, something, or someone, caught his attention in a way that had nothing to do with dominance. He entered the dimly lit lounge where an exclusive gathering awaited him. The air was thick with perfume, cigar smoke, and the hum of hushed conversations. Men and women recognized him instantly, bowing their heads subtly, murmuring titles and deference. Liam didn't acknowledge them. He had no time for meaningless pleasantries. Not tonight. Emma Carlisle was standing by the grand piano, a vision of grace that made the air itself seem to pause. Her auburn hair fell like silk over her shoulders, and her green eyes sparkled with curiosity and intelligence. She had a presence that drew attention, but unlike the other women in the room, there was no calculated performance in her stance, no attempt to seduce or manipulate. She was real, unguarded, and achingly beautiful. Liam noticed her instantly, not the kind of notice a man gives to a pretty face, but the kind that scans a target and measures potential, both for danger and for usefulness. He approached her, his footsteps silent but commanding. The world around them seemed to fade. Liam's reputation preceded him, yet he observed her reaction with amusement. Emma didn't flinch. She didn't smile coquettishly. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her expression curious, fearless, intrigued. Most women knew who he was and reacted with awe or fear. She reacted with subtle intrigue, and that spark was dangerous. Dangerous enough to make Liam consider an entirely new kind of game. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, extending her hand. The gesture was polite, confident, yet innocent. Her voice was calm, steady, and it carried a melody that made Liam pause for a heartbeat he never allowed himself to pause for. "Emma," he said, taking her hand, letting his fingers brush hers deliberately. "I've heard a lot about you." She raised an eyebrow, her green eyes narrowing slightly. "Have you now?" "Yes," he murmured, leaning slightly closer. "Enough to know that some things are worth more than power, more than revenge." His words were measured, deliberate, and dripping with attention that made her pulse quicken. Emma didn't know yet that he wasn't speaking about her as a woman. He was speaking about her as a weapon, a pawn, a key piece in a game she couldn't yet comprehend. The night unfolded like a slow dance of shadow and light. Liam and Emma talked briefly, exchanging words that hinted at curiosity and challenge. She spoke of her work in a local charity, her ambitions, her dreams. Liam listened, noting the strengths beneath her elegance, the subtle defiance in her posture, the way she held her own without trying to impress. It was rare, and it sparked something in him he hadn't anticipated, an itch of fascination beneath the cold, ruthless surface. By midnight, Liam's plan had formed. Revenge against his enemies could be executed alone, but it would be sweeter, cleaner and more permanent if he had the perfect ally or the perfect shield by his side. Emma would be more than a wife. She would be his advantage. And so, in the quiet of his penthouse, overlooking the city lights, he drafted the invisible blueprint for their union. This marriage would not be born of love. It would be a strategic weapon, and her heart would be both bait and tool. The weeks that followed were a blur of arrangements and whispered contracts disguised as wedding plans. Emma, blissfully unaware, floated through the events, believing she was charming Liam, captivating him, and in truth, she was. But Liam's interest was calculated, layered with intention. He admired her beauty and her spirit, yes, but more than that, he recognized her as the key to his ultimate game. Every laugh she offered, every gesture of trust she gave, was being meticulously recorded in his mind. He was not in love. Not yet. He was plotting. The wedding day arrived like a storm on the horizon, beautiful, shimmering, and full of anticipation. White roses lined the aisles, candlelight flickered against marble floors, and the city outside held its breath. Emma, radiant in her gown, seemed unaware of the undercurrent swirling around her. Liam watched her, feeling a rare pull in his chest, a momentary crack in his armor, but he stifled it, burying it under the weight of his plan. As they stood at the altar, exchanging vows that would bind them not out of love, but out of necessity, Liam whispered softly, his lips brushing her ear, "This marriage is our weapon, and your heart is part of the plan." Emma's smile was gentle, unaware of the storm that had begun. She looked up at him, green eyes sparkling with trust, with hope, and Liam, holding the image of her innocence and beauty, felt a dangerous thrill. The church doors opened suddenly, letting in a cold gust of wind that swept down the aisle. A shadow lingered just outside, a figure from Liam's past, watching, waiting. Liam's blue eyes narrowed, and the corner of his mouth curled slightly. The game had begun, and no one, including Emma, would walk away untouched. The night ended with applause, champagne, and smiles, but beneath the surface, the city had shifted. The move Liam had made would send ripples through every criminal corner he had conquered, and in the quiet of their honeymoon suite, he stood over Emma looking at her sleeping peacefully, and allowed himself one honest thought. They think I'm in control, but they don't know what's coming. A sudden phone buzz on the nightstand shattered the silence. Liam picked it up, his eyes narrowing as he read the incoming message. They know. She knows. It's starting. He froze. The calm, carefully constructed illusion of control began to crack. The dangerous game had only just begun. Outside the suite, shadows moved through the city streets. Liam's enemies were already plotting, and tonight, Emma's heart, her very life, was about to become the battlefield. Emma awoke in a room she barely recognized as her own. Silk sheets, chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city she had never imagined walking among. She had stepped into Liam Blackwood's world, and it dazzled and terrified her in equal measure. Every morning she was greeted with fresh flowers, champagne waiting on silver trays, and Liam's piercing gaze tracking her movements as if memorizing every curve, every gesture. She felt desired, worshipped even. But a small, nagging part of her mind whispered caution. The days were a whirlwind of parties and private dinners. Liam's mansion became her entire universe, and yet she felt trapped within the golden cage. He introduced her to the elite, the powerful, the dangerous, men who bowed to his command and women who envied her effortless elegance. Liam never forced her into any of it. He simply made her feel that she belonged, that she was part of the very air he breathed. And Emma, ambitious but naive, reveled in the attention, convinced she was capturing Liam's heart. Yet shadows lingered. She began to notice the subtle inconsistencies. The phone he never left unattended, The late-night calls where his jaw tightened and lips pressed into a line, the way his blue eyes could turn icy without warning. When she asked questions, he smiled that infuriating, disarming smile and said, "Some things are best left unseen, Emma." It was both a warning and a promise, and she couldn't decide which terrified her more. Their chemistry was impossible to ignore. A single touch, his hand grazing her arm while handing her a glass of wine, the brush of his lips near her ear in a fleeting whisper, sent shivers down her spine. She hated herself for wanting it, for craving the danger he radiated. But Liam was careful, always measuring. Every glance, every brush of skin was deliberate. As if he were slowly mapping her reactions, cataloging her responses. She was both pawn and prize, and she felt the thrill and fear of it in equal measure. Emma tried to rationalize it. She told herself that behind his dangerous charm, he must have some humanity. The city whispered rumors of his brutality, how rival families had vanished, how men had disappeared without a trace, but she had seen him laugh, smile, even offer rare kindness. Yet every act of tenderness was paired with that subtle undercurrent of control, a reminder that he was always watching, always calculating. Evenings became tests. Liam would invite her to galas where power shifted like a delicate chess game. Men whispered, women watched, and all the while Liam's hand would rest lightly on her back, claiming her presence as his own. He would occasionally lean close. Murmuring things meant only for her ears. Remember, Emma, appearances are everything, but secrets are what win wars. The words sent a thrill through her, though she couldn't fully grasp their meaning. Was he teaching her or warning her? She didn't know, and the uncertainty kept her on edge, craving more. Despite everything, Emma couldn't deny her feelings. She began to find herself drawn to the man beneath the ice-cold reputation. Liam's rare moments of vulnerability, when he paused over a letter and allowed a shadow of doubt to cross his face, when he lingered in his chair staring at the skyline as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders, made her wonder who he truly was. Each smile, each soft word only deepened her entanglement. The lines between strategy and desire blurred, leaving Emma torn between love, fear, and fascination. Meanwhile, Liam was in his element. The world feared him, but Emma intrigued him in a way power never had. She was more than a pawn. She was a test of his own control. How far could he push her, and how much could he resist the pull he secretly felt toward her? Every plan he set in motion against his enemies seemed to tighten the invisible leash around her. But Liam also found himself hesitating in moments where he should have been ruthless. The cold, calculating Mafia boss felt something he had never felt before, an itch in his chest, a dangerous vulnerability he could not name. The mansion was quiet one night, the city lights casting elongated shadows across polished floors. Emma wandered the hallways, noticing the subtle ways Liam had altered the space to protect her, while subtly reminding her of her place in his life. Every room held a memory, or a trap. Candles flickered as if sensing the tension in the air. She paused in front of a mirror, adjusting her gown and catching a glimpse of herself. Was she a wife, a tool, or a player in a game she didn't yet understand? The thought made her stomach knot with unease, yet she couldn't pull herself away from the intoxicating thrill of being near Liam. Then, just as the clock struck midnight, Liam received a notification on his secure device. He read it swiftly, his expression unreadable. A coded message from an enemy, a rival family he had believed neutralized, blinked on the screen. Final phase initiated. Are you ready? Liam's jaw tightened, and he folded the device into his pocket with deliberate calm. He looked at Emma standing in the doorway, her hair catching the light like a halo. He walked over, hands brushing hers briefly as if to reassure her, and whispered in that low, dangerous tone she had learned to obey without question, "When I come back, everything will change." Emma's stomach twisted, a mix of fear and anticipation. She nodded, unable to speak. She didn't know what he meant, but she trusted him, foolishly, completely, dangerously. And as Liam left the room, stepping into the night and the shadows beyond the mansion walls, Emma felt the first ripple of doubt, the first hint that the world she had stepped into was far darker and more dangerous than she could ever imagine. Outside, the city was alive with secrets and threats. Liam's enemies were already moving, and the chessboard he had laid out was beginning to shift in unexpected ways. Emma, left alone in the grand silence of the mansion, couldn't help but shiver, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that tonight her life and her husband's deadly plans were about to collide in ways that could destroy everything she had just begun to cherish. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind through the corridors became a countdown. Emma realized with a sick thrill that the life she had thought she understood was merely an illusion, and the real game, Liam's dangerous, beautiful, terrifying game, was only just beginning. Halfway through the night, a shadowed figure slipped silently past the gates of the mansion, carrying a message Liam had not anticipated. Somewhere in the city, the final move of his enemies was already in motion, and by dawn, nothing would be the same. The city was alive with murmurs of fear and awe as Liam Blackwood orchestrated his final strike. From the shadows of his penthouse, he monitored every move, every twitch of his rival's operations, every whisper of betrayal. The Harlan family had underestimated him. Their arrogance had led them to believe he was distracted, softened by marriage, that his obsession with Emma Carlisle would compromise his judgment. But they were wrong. Liam's mind was a razor, slicing through decades of deception and power plays. Every plan had been executed to perfection, every pawn in position, every enemy eliminated or neutralized. Emma, meanwhile, moved through the mansion in a haze. The luxurious spaces that had once felt enchanting now seemed heavy with silence. Liam was distant, buried in work that smelled of gunpowder and blood, speaking little and only in clipped tones. A part of her that had once reveled in his attention now twisted with suspicion. Why did he disappear at odd hours? Why were his smiles so fleeting? And why, when she tried to ask, did he answer only with evasions, with those calm, unreadable eyes that always left her uncertain? Curiosity became suspicion. She started to notice details she hadn't before. A ledger hidden in a drawer, a coded note tucked into a book she thought was mundane, the quiet way Liam's hand would brush over certain objects before anyone else entered the room. Emma's pulse raced as she pieced together fragments, sensing a darker truth than anything she had imagined. Her husband, the man who made her heart thrum and her breath catch, was not the man she thought she had married. One evening, as Liam returned from an unknown meeting, Emma confronted him in the grand study, the walls lined with books and the faint scent of expensive whiskey hanging in the air. "Liam," she said, her voice firm yet trembling, "I know something's happening. I can feel it. What are you hiding from me?" Her green eyes searched his blue, demanding honesty for the first time. Liam didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned against the polished desk, folding his arms over his chest. The dim light outlined his sharp jaw, the curve of his lips, the storm brewing in his gaze. "Emma," he began slowly, "there are things you're not meant to understand, things that could put you at risk." "Risk or lies?" Emma pressed, stepping closer. "I trusted you. I thought I knew you. If you loved me, even a fraction of what I feel for you, you would tell me the truth." Her hands clenched, and for a moment, Liam allowed himself a glance of something dangerous, something real, beyond the calculated control he always wielded. He straightened, a shadow of regret flickering in his expression before being swallowed by his usual steely demeanor. "I married you, Emma." "Yes," he admitted, voice low, measured. "But it was strategic. For my enemies, for the city, for us. Everything I've done, every strike, every move, it was to secure a future where no one could touch you, where no one could touch me." Emma's heart twisted. The revelation was devastating, but paradoxically, it was intoxicating. Part of her recoiled at the manipulation, at the cold, brutal truth. But another part of her, the part that had always felt the pull of his dangerous charm, was mesmerized. She saw him now in a way she hadn't before, powerful, ruthless, dangerous, and entirely devoted to a vision she couldn't fully grasp. "You used me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Everything. It was a lie." Liam stepped closer, their faces inches apart. The tension between them was electric, charged with the mix of anger, betrayal, and undeniable desire. "I used you to win," he said softly, almost a whisper. "But I never stopped wanting you, never stopped." He hesitated, letting the word linger like a blade. "You." Emma's breath caught. She wanted to hate him, to push him away, to scream at the injustice of it all. But her body betrayed her, leaning forward, aching for the man who had caused her heart to race and her soul to tremble. The allure of danger was intoxicating, a heady mix of fear and longing she couldn't resist. For the rest of the night, they moved in a careful dance of conversation and unspoken tension. Liam worked the phone, checking on the final stages of his plan, his blue eyes sharp and focused, while Emma watched, trying to understand a man who could be both her tormentor and the only person who made her feel truly alive. Every movement he made was precise, every gesture measured. He was a predator, and she was caught in the orbit of his brilliance and brutality. By dawn, the final message arrived. Liam's enemies had fallen, or fled. The city trembled in quiet awe at his dominance. The meticulous, flawless strike he had executed was complete. He looked out over the skyline from the penthouse balcony, the sun casting a golden haze across glass and steel, and allowed himself a single moment of triumph. Victory tasted sweet, but emptiness lingered. Emma's presence reminded him that even in power, he had a void he could not fill. He turned to her then, handing her a folder with his signature on it. Emma opened it, expecting a new financial document or another note in his cryptic style. Instead, her heart stopped. Divorce papers. Her hands shook as she looked up at him. "This was always meant to end, Emma," Liam said, his voice low, steady, and unwavering. "I loved you in my way, but now the game is over." Emma's eyes widened, the room spinning around her. Betrayal and shock collided with the residual pull of desire she felt for him. The man who had dominated her world, who had made her heart race and her mind reel, was now placing a line between them that seemed impossible to cross. She wanted to scream, to beg, to cry, but her mouth would not form the words. Liam, always composed, took her trembling hands in his and held them briefly, a fleeting reminder of the connection that had entangled them from the start. Then he stepped back, cool and distant, leaving her alone in the vast, echoing penthouse, the papers cold and heavy in her hands. Outside, the city buzzed on, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shifted Emma's life. Liam's enemies may have been defeated, but the war for their hearts, for trust, for control, was only beginning. And somewhere deep in the shadows, Liam knew that the repercussions of his actions, the truths revealed and the lies told, would come crashing down in ways neither of them could anticipate. As Liam disappeared into the black car waiting outside, a masked figure watched from a nearby rooftop, phone in hand. A new threat had arrived, one that knew every secret, every move Liam had made, and it had a message for Emma that would shatter her world before the sun even rose. Emma unlocked the door to her modest apartment, the sound of the latch echoing in the quiet hallway. She paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. 6 months. Half a year had passed since Liam Blackwood had walked away from her life, leaving her alone in the sprawling emptiness of his world. Gone were the chandeliers, the silk sheets, and the champagne trays. In their place, simple furniture, thrifted decor, and the faint hum of city life filtering through thin walls. The simplicity felt unfamiliar, yet comforting. She dropped her bag by the door, her fingers brushing over the worn leather as if it held a memory. Emma had rebuilt her life piece by piece. She had started a small boutique, selling handcrafted jewelry and clothing she designed herself. Each sale, each interaction with a customer was a victory, a step toward independence. Friends she had ignored during her whirlwind marriage had returned, offering support, laughter, and grounding she hadn't realized she craved. But even as she flourished, shadows of Liam lingered. She caught herself reaching for the phone, half expecting a text, a call, a simple good morning message that never came. Memories of his hands on her back, the warmth of his voice, and the piercing intensity of his gaze invaded her mind at the oddest moments. She hated the pull she still felt. She hated that even 6 months later, her heart remembered him better than she wanted it to. Liam, meanwhile, sat in his high-rise office overlooking the city, a glass of scotch in hand. The skyline glimmered, but the view felt hollow. He had won everything. His enemies were neutralized, his power solidified, but nothing tasted sweet anymore. He replayed the months in his head, the nights Emma's laughter had filled the mansion, the warmth of her hand in his, the fleeting moments when she had looked at him with trust. He realized, perhaps too late, that her absence carved a void in him that money, power, and revenge could never fill. He was colder now, more isolated than ever. The men in his organization whispered rumors, speculated about his silence, his withdrawn demeanor, but no one truly knew the storm inside him. The city feared him, but fear could not reach the ache that lingered when he thought of Emma. Every calculated move, every strategic victory now felt meaningless because she wasn't there to witness it. Emma moved through her days in a rhythm she had created: work, friends, errands. She smiled, laughed, and built a life that was entirely her own. Yet the physical reality of her body began to betray her. Strange aches, sharp pains in her abdomen, lingering fatigue. She dismissed them as stress. Too much work. Too many sleepless nights, she told herself. Liam's absence had forced her to be strong, and she would continue to be. But the nights were different. Alone in her apartment, shadows stretching across the walls, Emma's thoughts turned darker. She remembered the intensity of Liam's eyes, the dangerous allure that had both frightened and excited her. The thought of him walking away, leaving everything behind, including her, was a wound that never fully healed. She wrapped herself in blankets, trying to sleep, but rest eluded her. Her dreams were haunted by a man who had controlled her life, yet still held power over her heart. One evening, she sat at her small kitchen table, poring over the ledgers for her boutique. The soft glow of the desk lamp highlighted her tense expression. She paused mid-calculation, feeling another sharp pang in her side. Her hand went to her abdomen instinctively, and for a moment, fear gripped her. But she shook it off. She had survived chaos before. She could survive this. Liam was gone. She was alone, and she had to be strong. Miles away, Liam leaned over the balcony of his office, the wind tugging at his coat. His phone lay on the desk, silent for the first time in months. Yet he could not stop thinking about her, the way she had looked the last time he left, the quiet despair behind her poised smile, the faint scent of her perfume that lingered in his memory. He questioned himself constantly. Had he done the right thing? Had his calculated moves to secure power cost him the only thing that truly mattered? As the city moved beneath him, lights blinking like distant stars, Liam felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Guilt? Regret? Or something more dangerous? Fear. He realized that despite his dominance, Despite the flawless execution of every plan, one thing had eluded him: the chance to truly protect Emma, to keep her safe from the life he had pulled her into. Emma, restless and uneasy, went to bed that night, tossing beneath her thin sheets. Every creak of the apartment, every sound from the streets below, made her pulse spike. Her hands rested on her abdomen once more, and for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if it wasn't just stress she felt. The thought scared her, but she quickly pushed it aside, burying it beneath layers of determination and denial. The hours stretched thin. In the early morning, the city was quiet, save for the occasional wail of a siren and the hum of distant traffic. Liam's mind, restless and relentless, would not allow him to sleep. He stared at the dark skyline, replaying every decision, every misstep, every glance he had ever given Emma. And then, the shrill ring of his phone shattered the silence. He picked up swiftly, his sharp instincts already on full alert. The voice on the other end was frantic, panicked, almost breaking under the weight of fear. "Mr. Blackwood?" The nurse's voice trembled. "Your ex-wife. She's in labor, and she's in danger." Liam froze. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble floor. His mind raced. Danger? Emma? The months apart. The distance he had tried to maintain all came crashing down in an instant. Every memory, every regret, every suppressed emotion surged like a tidal wave. He ran a hand through his dark hair, jaw tight, muscles coiled. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice low, deadly, and commanding. "Tell me now." The nurse's voice shook again. "It's critical. She won't survive without you. Please, you need to come immediately." In that moment, Liam Blackwood's world narrowed to a single point: Emma. All the power, all the victories, all the revenge, nothing mattered. The calculated, ruthless Mafia boss was now a man consumed by fear and determination. He grabbed his coat, his mind already racing with escape routes, threats, and possibilities. Outside, the city seemed to hold its breath. Liam's black car roared through the streets, weaving past traffic, a storm in motion. Every second counted. Emma's life, and perhaps their unborn child, hung in the balance. He would stop at nothing. As the skyline blurred past, Liam's mind recalled every laugh, every argument, every stolen glance that had brought them together. The months apart had taught him one undeniable truth: he could not lose her. Not now, not ever. Meanwhile, Emma gritted her teeth against the pain, clutching the hospital bed as nurses rushed around her. The contractions came faster, sharper, and she realized, with sheer terror, that if Liam didn't arrive in time, the life they had unknowingly created together might be lost forever. The city streets blurred beneath the tires of Liam Blackwood's black-armored SUV, the hum of the engine drowned out by the pounding of his own heartbeat. Every red light, every congested lane, every honking horn became a minor annoyance compared to the singular thought consuming him: Emma. 6 months apart had taught him a bitter lesson. He could dominate the city, manipulate rival families, eliminate threats with precision, but none of that mattered if he lost her now. His mind raced back to the countless moments he had taken her for granted, the nights he had walked away from her warmth, the times he had allowed ambition to overshadow tenderness, the way he had left her trust unprotected. Those memories clawed at him with a new urgency. Emma's voice, delicate yet firm, still echoed in his mind: "I trusted you." The hospital wasn't far, but every second felt like an eternity. Traffic snarled on the avenues, construction barriers blocked his path, and the usual obstacles of the city now seemed maliciously timed. Liam's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel, eyes narrowing in cold precision. A minor accident on the highway? Cleared within seconds. He pushed the driver aside without hesitation. A blocked lane, maneuvered around it with reckless skill. Nothing could stop him. Inside the hospital, Emma's world was collapsing in a different way. Each contraction made her gasp, her vision blurred, her arms trembling as she clutched the rails of the hospital bed. She had never felt such raw, uncontrollable pain, and beneath it, a deeper fear gnawed at her. Alone. She was utterly alone. All the nurses and doctors around her moved with urgency, but the only person she wanted, the only person who could anchor her in the chaos, was Liam. Through clenched teeth, she whispered, barely audible, "I can't do this without you." Somewhere between despair and determination, those words traveled faster than sound could carry them. Liam's ears caught the imagined whisper in the chaos of his mind, and he gritted his teeth. Pride warred with fear. The cold, controlled Mafia boss was no stranger to emergencies, to life-and-death decisions. But this was different. This was personal. This was Emma. Minutes, or maybe seconds, stretched like hours. Nurses attempted to stabilize her, adjusting monitors and checking vitals, but Emma's panic was contagious. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bed, nails biting into the mattress, as waves of pain rolled over her relentlessly. Every scream tore at Liam's memory, even as he barreled through the city streets, his body coiled with energy, his mind a single laser of focus. When he arrived at the hospital, the world seemed to move in slow motion. Doors swung open as he entered, guards and staff clearing his path instinctively. No one questioned his presence. He was Liam Blackwood. Authority radiated from him even as fear threatened to shatter his composure. He moved swiftly through the corridors, his tailored coat brushing against walls, hands clenching and unclenching. Emma's vision was a storm of pain and fear. Each wave of contraction made her vision flicker, the lights in the room blurring into streaks of color. She tried to breathe, tried to focus, but the terror of being alone gnawed at her resolve. Then, amid the haze, she felt a presence, a shadow in the doorway, tall, commanding, indomitable. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a mixture of relief, fear, and longing. "Please, I can't—" The rest of her plea was drowned out by another contraction, the room vibrating with the intensity of her struggle. Liam dropped to his knees beside the bed, taking her hand in his. His touch was both a promise and a weapon. His blue eyes, sharp and unwavering, locked on hers as if to transfer strength. "You're not alone, Emma," he said, voice low and dangerous, a mixture of tenderness and authority. "I'm here. I won't leave you." For a brief moment, the air in the room seemed to still. Time slowed. Liam's mind raced with every contingency, her health, the child's health, potential complications, but his focus narrowed to one truth. Emma's life depended on him being fearless, decisive, unwavering. He had conquered empires, but none of that prepared him for this intimate, raw fight. The nurses moved around them, tense, but Liam's presence commanded the space. One of them attempted to speak, but he held up a hand, a silent assertion that he was the anchor in the storm. He had always been a master of control, and now that control was channeled entirely into saving her. Emma's breaths came in ragged gasps. Every word she tried to speak was swallowed by pain. But she clung to him. Her fingers dug into his coat, seeking something steady, tangible, a lifeline. Liam's thumb rubbed across her knuckles, slow, deliberate, grounding her even as the room seemed to tilt around her. "Stay with me, Emma," he said firmly, his voice almost a growl, commanding yet soft. "Breathe. You're stronger than you think." The hours, or what felt like hours, passed in a blur of pain, commands, and whispered encouragement. Liam never let go, never wavered, every ounce of his body and mind focused on her survival. He recalled every past mistake, every moment he had taken her for granted and used them as fuel to fight harder, faster, sharper. He would not fail her. Not this time. Then, just as a sense of hope began to seep into the chaos, the monitor next to her bed beeped sharply. A doctor rushed forward, face pale beneath the bright hospital lights. "We need him to make a decision now, or she won't survive," the doctor yelled, turning to Liam, eyes wide with urgency. Time seemed to freeze. Liam's mind raced, weighing every option, every potential outcome. The city, the crime, the power, none of it mattered anymore. This was the moment that would define everything. His pride, his fear, his love, everything collided in a single, raw heartbeat. Liam's jaw tightened. He leaned over Emma, eyes blazing with determination. His voice was a low promise, a roar of control and devotion. "Tell me what to do," he demanded, every nerve taut, every muscle coiled, "and I'll do it." Emma's trembling gaze met his, her fear mingled with trust. Somewhere deep in the shadows of her panic, she knew that Liam Blackwood, the dangerous, infuriating, brilliant man who had once used her heart as a weapon, was now the only thing standing between her and death. Outside the room, the night hummed with city lights, indifferent to the storm inside. But inside, every second mattered. One wrong move, one hesitation, and everything they had survived, everything they had endured, would be lost. The doctor stepped back, voice urgent, eyes locked on Liam. "It's either your choice, hers or the baby's life, Mr. Blackwood. Make it fast or you'll lose both." The delivery room was a storm of controlled chaos. Monitors beeped. The sterile scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint tang of adrenaline, and every second stretched into a lifetime. Liam Blackwood stood rigid at Emma's side, hand gripping hers so tightly his knuckles whitened. The man who had ruled empires, eliminated rivals, and commanded fear with a glance was now reduced to something human, frantic, terrified, and entirely dependent on her endurance. Emma's face was contorted in pain, sweat glistening along her brow, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. The intensity of labor was unlike anything she had imagined, her body torn between fear and instinct, her mind flickering between panic and determination. And yet, despite the terror, her eyes sought Liam's, needing him as a tether to the world she felt slipping away. "I can't," she gasped, voice breaking. "I can't do this without you." Liam's heart clenched, a primal ache that had nothing to do with power or pride. He pressed his forehead to hers briefly, grounding her, reminding both of them that they were not alone. "Yes, you can," he whispered, his voice low, dangerous, filled with an intensity she hadn't felt in months. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Emma, and I'm right here. I won't let go." As the contractions continued, Emma's mind wandered, fragile, fearful, yet sharp. And then, amidst the haze of pain, a memory surfaced. Liam's initial plans, the revenge, the marriage forged as a weapon. She had hated him, despised the way he had used her, resented the cold brilliance behind his charm. But now, in this crucible of life and death, she saw something else. The man who had orchestrated all the manipulation had done it out of fear, out of wounds inflicted by his own betrayals, not hers. You never hated me," she whispered between contractions, disbelief and wonder mingling in her voice. Liam's blue eyes, stormy and haunted, met hers, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, the cold, ruthless facade cracked. "I hated what I had to do," he admitted, voice raw, shaking slightly for the first time in years. "But I never hated you." The confession hit Emma like a physical blow. Her chest heaved, not just from pain, but from the sheer weight of the truth. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment she had feared his indifference, It was rooted in his past, in betrayal he had suffered long before she ever entered his life. And now, under the brutal intensity of her labor, she saw the man behind the empire, the man capable of love, capable of remorse, capable of wanting her without conditions. Time collapsed around them. The life and death urgency made every word, every glance, every touch electric. Liam's hand brushed against hers, lingering a heartbeat too long, and the old chemistry, the pull that had drawn them together in fire and danger, ignited again. Emma felt it in her bones, a mixture of fear, longing, and the desperate need for connection. She reached for him, fingers threading through his, holding him close as though his presence could steady her trembling body. "Stay with me," she gasped again, lips barely forming the words, "Please, don't leave me." "I'm not going anywhere," he said, voice a growl of raw promise, heart hammering as he leaned closer, pressing a chaste but electrifying kiss to her temple. "I'm right here, every second. You hear me? Every second." The medical team worked with relentless precision, voices clipped with urgency, and Liam hung on every instruction, every word, every command. Each movement Emma made, every gasp, every grunt, was mirrored by his focus. He had navigated wars, assassinations, and betrayals, but nothing had prepared him for the terrifying, beautiful fragility of watching someone he loved fight for life. And then, at last, the sound that shattered the tension. The first cry. A newborn's wail filled the room, a sound so pure and piercing it made Liam's chest tighten. Relief, joy, and raw emotion collided inside him as he watched the nurses carefully hand the baby to the attending physician. Emma's face, pale and flushed, broke into a trembling, exhausted smile. Liam pressed his hand to her forehead, feeling her sweat, her exhaustion, her vulnerability. She looked up at him, eyes wide, shimmering with tears, and whispered, "We did it." But the relief was fleeting. No sooner had the newborn's cries echoed through the room than Emma's knees buckled. She tried to hold onto the bed rails, tried to sit upright, but her strength was gone. Her vision blurred, and a sharp wave of dizziness overtook her. "Emma!" Liam shouted, panic tearing through his voice. He dropped to his knees, wrapping her in his arms with a force born of terror and desperation. The baby was safe for now, but Emma, his heart, his world, the woman who had survived his manipulations and loved him anyway, was faltering. "Hold on," he barked at her, voice breaking under the weight of fear he had never allowed himself to feel. "Stay with me. You hear me? Stay with me, Emma. I won't let you go. Not now. Not ever." She clung to him weakly, and he cradled her as if the world itself depended on it. Every breath she took was a prayer, every beat of her heart a fragile thread he was determined to protect. Liam felt the full gravity of his mistakes, the cost of his pride, and the depth of the love he had never admitted until now. The doctors rushed back into the room, preparing for emergency interventions, but Liam refused to step away. His presence, unyielding and fierce, anchored Emma even as the exhaustion threatened to consume her entirely. The fight was far from over, and Liam knew, with a chilling clarity, that surviving this night would demand every ounce of courage, strength, and cunning he possessed. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the battle unfolding within the sterile walls of the hospital. But inside, life, love, and survival collided in a raw, electric storm. Liam's world had shifted. This was no longer just about power, revenge, or strategy. This was about the woman he loved, the child they had brought into existence, and the unbreakable bond forged in pain and revelation. As the baby's cries echoed, Liam pressed his forehead to Emma's, whispering vows only she could hear, unaware that a new danger lurked just beyond the hospital walls, one that could destroy everything they had survived, starting with the life of the child they had just brought into the world. The days after the birth were a fragile blend of joy, exhaustion, and tentative trust. The apartment Emma had chosen, a modest, sunlit space with soft pastel walls and second-hand furniture, now echoed with the cries and coos of their newborn child. Liam, once a man who commanded fear across cities and boardrooms, found himself navigating the delicate terrain of diapers, midnight feedings, and the relentless rhythm of a life he had never known. He was meticulous, focused, and utterly consumed by protecting the fragile existence of the three most important people in his world. Emma, meanwhile, insisted on maintaining control. She had survived months of manipulation, betrayal, and domination. She would not let her child, or herself, be reduced to a pawn in Liam's empire. Every decision was deliberate. Every feeding, every doctor's visit, every moment of public exposure. She did not resent Liam's presence. She wanted him involved, but on her terms. Liam's pride bristled initially, but he quickly realized that this wasn't a challenge to his authority. It was Emma asserting her identity, and she would not compromise it. Their reconciliation was slow, delicate, and full of tension. Liam had spent years relying on fear, control, and strategy, but Emma required a different approach: patience, honesty, and emotional presence. He found himself learning anew: how to hold without suffocating, how to speak without commanding, how to love without using it as leverage. Each evening, as Emma cradled their baby in the dim glow of the living room, he would sit beside her, fingers brushing hers lightly, careful not to overstep. "Liam," she said one night, voice firm yet soft, "I love you. But this child isn't a tool, and neither am I. You have to let me make choices, my choices about our family." He met her gaze, blue eyes filled with a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. "I understand," he murmured. "I never realized how much I needed to learn from you. I was so focused on control, I forgot what matters most." That moment, quiet and intimate, marked a subtle shift. They began to rebuild, negotiating boundaries, sharing responsibilities, and discovering the balance between Liam's dangerous world and the ordinary, precious life Emma had fought to create. It was an exercise in humility for Liam and in trust for Emma. Each small victory, the first night without tears, a shared laugh over a diaper mishap, a gentle argument resolved without tension, became a brick in the foundation of their renewed relationship. Yet even in these moments of fragile peace, the shadow of Liam's past lingered. He could not ignore the world he had built, the enemies he had made, or the rivals who still harbored grudges. Emma, perceptive and cautious, noticed the subtle moments, the way Liam's jaw tightened at a street confrontation, the way his eyes scanned for threats when the baby slept, the way he occasionally clenched his fists in private. She understood the duality of the man she loved, tender and protective here, ruthless and dangerous beyond these walls. Despite the looming tension, the chemistry between them reignited in quiet, intimate ways. A brush of hands while rocking the baby, a whispered "thank you" as Liam prepared a bottle, a fleeting kiss when Emma leaned against him in exhaustion. All of it reminded them of what had drawn them together in the first place: the dangerous allure, the emotional intensity, and the magnetic pull that neither time nor betrayal could sever. Evenings became their sanctuary. Liam would sit on the edge of the bed while Emma fed their child, the soft light catching his features, revealing a man humbled, transformed by love and responsibility. "I don't deserve you," he admitted one night, voice low, almost a growl, "but I will spend every day trying to be worthy." Emma smiled, brushing her fingers against his cheek. "Then start by staying beside us," she said softly, "and listening. That's all I ask." For a while, peace seemed attainable. The apartment, though modest, echoed with laughter, warmth, and small victories. Liam, for the first time in years, allowed himself to envision a life not dominated by fear and power, but by family, love, and shared responsibility. Emma, once a pawn and then a survivor, finally felt the strength of her autonomy, even as she allowed herself to feel the deep pull of their connection. But the fragile calm shattered one night. Liam returned from a discreet meeting, alert, senses taut, when the unmistakable hum of danger reached him. A rival, one he thought neutralized months ago, had resurfaced, and the threat was immediate and personal. Emma and the baby, though unaware, were now in the crosshairs of a predator who had learned of their location. Liam's mind shifted instantly. The calm he had been cultivating vanished, replaced by the cold precision of a man who had survived countless wars, but had never allowed anyone he loved to be at risk. He glanced at Emma, asleep with the baby cradled against her chest, and felt a surge of protective fury. He picked up the secure phone, dialing numbers with lightning speed. Contacts, allies, and enforcers came online immediately, yet the knowledge remained. The danger was close, and no amount of planning could replace the immediacy of protecting those inside the apartment. The night outside was dark and quiet, but Liam's instincts screamed otherwise. Every shadow, every faint sound, every unexpected movement set him on edge. He was a man who had once controlled entire cities with fear and strategy, but now a single rival threatened to undo everything he had fought for, everything he had rebuilt, everything he had loved. Emma stirred, sensing unease even in sleep. Liam placed a hand over hers, brushing her hair back, whispering, "Sleep, I've got this." His voice, low and dangerous, carried the weight of a promise and the threat of retribution. The apartment doors clicked, too subtle to be noticed by anyone but Liam. He rose, eyes narrowing, muscles coiled like a panther ready to strike. Every inch of his being screamed that this was no ordinary threat. Whoever approached knew him, knew Emma, and knew how to cut into the life he had worked to protect. The baby stirred, sensing tension, tiny hands reaching out instinctively. Liam lowered himself slightly, one hand resting protectively over the crib, the other forming a fist, ready to confront whatever danger awaited. Every memory of past betrayals, every calculated strike, every lesson in survival surged into focus. He would not fail them, not now. A shadow moved at the edge of the window, silent and deliberate. Liam's pulse accelerated, and he whispered under his breath, teeth clenched, "You won't touch them." But the figure held something in their hand, a message, a warning, and the promise of chaos that would force Liam to risk everything to protect his family. The night air was thick with tension as Liam Blackwood crouched in the shadows outside the apartment, eyes scanning every movement, every flicker of light. Months of planning, years of ruthlessness, and countless betrayals had led to this moment. The rival who had threatened Emma and their newborn was close, too close. But Liam's experience, instincts, and sheer determination left nothing to chance. Every breath was measured, every heartbeat aligned with the rhythm of the danger he was about to neutralize. Inside, Emma sat with their child cradled in her arms, soft coos filling the room, a fragile beacon of life in the storm. She had learned, slowly but surely, to assert herself, to demand respect, to insist that Liam's love come not through control but through partnership. And yet, the unease that lingered in the back of her mind refused to dissipate entirely. She could feel the threat beyond the walls, the invisible tension pressing against the safety she had built. Liam moved with precision, each step deliberate, every decision reflecting the cold efficiency that had earned him fear and respect throughout the city. But this was no ordinary operation. It was personal. Failure was unthinkable. Emma and their child were not collateral. They were the center of his world, and nothing, no rival, no bullet, no calculated threat, would harm them while he drew breath. He struck silently, eliminating the shadow that had dared to invade their lives. The intruder never realized what hit them. Liam's moves were swift, surgical, merciless, but careful. No harm came to the apartment, to Emma, or to the tiny life that represented everything he had once fought to control and manipulate. When the dust settled, Liam stood alone in the dim corridor, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his brow. The threat was gone, erased with lethal precision, and for the first time in months, he felt a measure of peace. Back inside, Emma sensed the shift. Liam returned, coat dusted with the night, eyes sharp but softening as they fell on her and the child. The adrenaline, the fear, the months of tension melted slightly in the presence of the tiny life between them and the woman who had endured so much. She looked up at him, no words needed. The unspoken bond, the recognition of survival, passed between them silently. "Everything's fine," he said, voice low but steady, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "It's over. They won't touch us again." Emma's lips curved into a smile, tentative at first, then blooming into the full warmth of relief and trust. "We survived," she said softly, eyes glimmering with tears and joy. "And we'll survive anything together." The room seemed to exhale with them. Liam approached, kneeling beside her, the baby cradled carefully in her arms. He extended his hands, and together they held their child. Two halves of a broken world, now whole again. The intensity of past betrayals, the weight of revenge, the darkness of his former life, all of it paled against this fragile, radiant moment of connection. For Liam, the transformation was profound. The man who had once relied on fear, manipulation, and strategy now understood partnership, patience, and love without conditions. He looked at Emma, seeing not just the woman he had once used as a weapon, but the equal, resilient, brilliant partner who had endured everything and refused to be diminished. Emma, in turn, realized the depth of her own power. She had survived the manipulation, endured the danger, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unwavering. She had carved out a life within the shadow of a man who commanded fear across the city, insisting that her child, her autonomy, and her love be respected. And Liam, for all his brilliance and ruthlessness, had learned to step into the light of partnership, to let her lead as much as he protected. The baby stirred, tiny hands reaching instinctively, eyes blinking against the soft glow of the apartment lights. Emma laughed, a sound of pure, unguarded joy. Liam leaned in, brushing his lips across her forehead, a kiss that carried gratitude, love, and unspoken promises. They spoke little in that moment, words unnecessary, their shared glances, their gentle touches, and the steady rhythm of their child's heartbeat were enough. The world outside, the city, the enemies, the legacy of power and violence, faded into insignificance. Here, in this quiet, fragile domesticity, they were safe, whole, and reborn together. Days turned into weeks, and Liam continued to support Emma, not as a dominant force, but as a partner, an equal. He managed his empire with discretion, keeping threats away from their doorstep while she built her own business, thriving under her own terms. Their love was no longer a weapon, a manipulation, or a game. It was respect, passion, and devotion, forged in fire and tested in life and death situations. Evenings became their sanctuary. Liam would help with the baby, sometimes silently watching, sometimes actively engaged, but always present. Emma, confident and radiant, balanced her newfound authority with tenderness, allowing herself to lean on him when necessary, but never surrendering her independence. Together, they created a rhythm that was rare and beautiful, one built on trust, love, and shared power. One night, they sat together in the living room, baby sleeping peacefully in a crib nearby. Liam's hand rested lightly on Emma's, eyes scanning hers with an intensity softened by love. "We've been through hell," he said quietly, "and yet, here we are." Emma smiled, brushing her fingers through his dark hair, feeling the warmth of a man who had finally been transformed by love. "Here we are," she echoed, "and no one, not the world, not our past, not anyone, can take this from us." Liam leaned down, pressing a kiss to her temple, a silent promise that their journey was only beginning. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent yet alive, but inside their apartment, a new world had emerged, one where love, power, and respect coexisted, where danger was met with strategy but tempered by devotion, and where two people had finally found equilibrium after chaos. The baby stirred again, tiny cries echoing softly, and Liam laughed, low and warm. "We're unstoppable," he whispered, eyes meeting Emma's with fire and certainty. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the warmth and stability of the man who had once used her as a weapon and now held her as an equal. "We survived everything," she murmured, voice soft but full of strength, "and we'll survive anything together." Liam kissed her forehead, lingering, savoring the moment, knowing it was both an ending and a beginning. Their empire of love, power, and respect had been forged in fire, betrayal, and redemption, and it would only grow stronger from here. Outside the window, the city lights sparkled like distant stars. The threats of the past were gone for now, but Liam's eyes, scanning the horizon, held a hint of vigilance. For the first time in years, he realized that while love had transformed them, the world would always demand vigilance, strategy, and strength. Yet with Emma by his side, he felt invincible.